Hello everyone, this is Harry. Today, we have an American disaster film, The Day After Tomorrow. Jack was a paleoclimatologist working for the National Meteorological Administration. He and his colleagues were studying prehistoric climate in Antarctica, where a whole glacier suddenly collapsed. This phenomenon showed that the high concentration of greenhouse gases in the ice core was causing global warming. Global Warming Symposium in New Delhi, India. Jack said they found evidence of climate change as early as 10,000 years ago. Maybe global warming in 100 years' time would bring the Earth into the ice age of 200 years. The sudden drop of surface temperature caused by global warming seemed contradictory, but it was not. The climate of the northern hemisphere was due to the North Atlantic Current. The heat from the sun was concentrated at the equator and carried by the sea to the northern hemisphere. Global warming would cause the polar ice to break up and block this warm current. When the current disappeared, the warm climate disappeared. If we didn't try to remedy it now, our descendants would pay a heavy price. But in the eyes of politicians, the economy was the most important thing. They thought Jack was alarmist. But Jack's inference was too optimistic. Because the global climate change had begun. First it snowed heavily in India. The unprecedented low temperature caused chaos. Then there was a giant hailstorm in Tokyo, hitting the Japanese. Then there was a powerful hurricane in Hawaii. When people saw these news reports, they thought they were normal and they didn't pay attention to them. Jack's wife Lucy was a doctor. Their son Sam was a high school student. Because of Jack's work, he needed to go out frequently to research and didn't have much time for family. Lucy understood and supported him very much, but Sam was estranged from him. That day, Sam was flying to New York for an academic competition. Jack wanted to get closer to his son on the way to the airport. But finally he could only look at Sam's back, felt upset. Sam and two classmates met with a strong storm on the plane, but luckily, no danger. At this time, a large number of migratory birds appeared over New York. The animals in the zoo also became restless. At midnight, Jack received a call from Professor of the Scottish Centre for the Climate Observation. A few days ago Rapson found out, one of the ocean exploration boys recorded a 13-degree drop in water temperature. They thought it was a fault, but now there were 4 more boys showing the same result. It seemed that the melting of icebergs mentioned by Jack would block the North Atlantic Ocean current. Jack had no idea that global climate change would happen so quickly. Rapson said that no weather prediction system could calculate this kind of change. Only Jack's prehistoric climate change system could be predicted. Then there was a tornado alert in Los Angeles. The tornado was so powerful that all the buildings were destroyed. Cars were flying in the air. The State Meteorological Administration held an emergency meeting. At this time, the weather forecast system had completely failed. Jack said that the bad weather was caused by the great change of the Atlantic current. This kind of weather would not only continue, but also got worse. People would face a major climate disaster. Jack suggested that the government took immediate and long-term measures. His program could figure out what had happened next. Hoped that the boss could let him use the computer host to build the weather forecast model. The boss thought Jack was just talking on paper and gave him 48 hours. Jack used the simulation program to calculate that the weather would change dramatically in 6 to 8 weeks. He reported the situation to the vice president. It was suggested that large-scale emergency evacuation should be carried out in the northern states. But the vice president didn't take it seriously at all. At this time, the heavy snow in the UK had lasted for 24 hours. Professor Rapson and 2 colleagues were also trapped in the observation center. 3 helicopters encountered the eye of the storm. The oil pipe and fuselage frozen instantly, resulting in damage and death. One of the surviving pilot had just opened the cabin door, then he was frozen into ice sculpture. The New York street was hit by heavy rain and the traffic was in chaos. Sam suggested that his classmates went to the public library where relatively high. At this time, the torrential flood was like a wall to New York City. Sam's classmates Laura went to the car to get her passport. She had no awareness of the coming flood. Sam saw the danger and rushed into the water to save Laura. Jack analyzed the data sent by Rapson and found that, in 7 to 10 days, people would enter another ice age. He advised Rapson to leave as soon as possible, but it was too late. His last wish was that Jack would do his best to save more people. New York was in a terrible disaster. Cell phones were out of service. Sam thought of the power of the old telephone meter from the telephone line. So he contacted his father on the telephone of the library. Jack told Sam that the storm would turn into a blizzard. The eye of a storm was like a tornado. The cold air could freeze people to death in an instant. Told Sam not to go out and stay indoor burning things to keep warm. And he would go to save Sam. Before finishing speaking, Sam was drowned in the flood. Laura yelled anxiously, and finally Sam swam out of the water. Put down the phone, Jack immediately prepared polar equipment and rushed to New York to save his son. The boss wanted Jack to report directly to the president before he left. Jack knew that the government didn't necessarily believe him, but it was still the last try to fulfill the duty. At the meeting, Jack told him that the global climate would change on a large scale. The super blizzard would last 7 to 10 days. When the storm stoked, the entire northern hemisphere would be covered with snow. The temperature was as low as the last ice age. It was suggested that the government evacuated people from the south to Mexico. It was too late for people in the north, because they frozen to death as soon as they went out. The vice president was still questioning Jack's motives. Fortunately, in the end, the president decided to use Jack's plan to evacuate the southern residents. By this time, it was snowing in New York. The people in the library were going south while the snow was not deep. Sam told everyone that the cold outside would kill all. They should stay home and wait for the storm to pass. But people didn't believe him. Only his friends and a few remained. Jack's two old partners didn't want to see him in danger alone, so they went out with him. At the same time, a large of Americans rushed to Mexico to avoid the snowstorm. The Mexican government blocked the border, until the president of the US agreed to cancel all debts in Latin America. Mexico would agree to open up. Lucy's hospital was in danger and everyone ran away. But there was a small patient who couldn't leave without help. Unable to contact his family, Lucy decided to stay alone and wait for the ambulance with him. Sam stayed in the library and had to burn books. He firmly believed that his father would come to save him, but he seemed to be estranged from his father. In fact, at the bottom of his heart, he had boundless respect and trust for his father. Because of the snowstorm, Jack's car couldn't move forward. They had to put on their snowshoes and go on foot. The snowstorm had covered some of the buildings. They were walking on the roof of a shopping mall. A piece of glass on the roof cracked and Frank accidentally fell down. When Jack and Jason wanted to pull him up, Frank saw that glass couldn't stand too much weight. Resolutely cut the rope and sacrificed himself to save the life of his friends. Lucy at the hospital was waiting for the ambulance to pick up the little patient. When disaster came, everyone was in danger. Normal people who still stick to their jobs. What they gave us was so touching. At night, Laura was a little sad about the sudden disaster. At this time, Sam finally summoned up the courage to tell her his love. Sam's wisdom and bravery in times of danger made Laura also love him. This president of the US insisted on evacuating the people first, and he still stayed to the end. As a result, the president's car was trapped in the snowstorm and died. Laura had a high fever due to an infection in her leg. Only an injection of antibiotics could help. Sam thought there must be some medicine on the freighter that was washed into street by the flood. The other two classmates also decided to venture to the freighter to find medicine with Sam. After they found the medicine in the clinic, they were going to find some food in the restaurant. At this time, they came across wolves running out of the zoo to look for food. Sam stepped forward to lead the wolves to a cabin and shut him up. They were able to escape. And the storm eye had hit, all the buildings were quickly frozen up. Sam and friends ran into the gallery at the last minute. The fire helped everyone survive. Jack took his friend to the room in time to avoid the eye of the storm. When Jason woke up, they started again. On the road, they saw frozen people everywhere. Jack began to worry about Sam's safety. At this time, the weather satellite received a report that the storm began to dissipate. Jack finally arrived at Sam's library. The library had been buried in the snow, only a roof was exposed outside. Entered the library, Jack found a light in a door. He opened the door with a worried mood and saw several people sleeping by the fire. He was very excited when he saw that Sam was safe. Father and son hugged each other tightly. The vice president immediately sent a helicopter to New York to rescue Jack. Searched and rescued more survivors who were still in the room to avoid the eye of the storm. At the end of the film, the vice president spoke through the media. The past few weeks had made us feel that, in the face of the power of nature, human beings were so small. For many years, the human thought we could squander the resources of nature without any consequences. In fact, we were all wrong. We must learn from our mistakes. Well, that's all for today. Don't forget to follow and like my videos. Thank you for watching. See you next time.